Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Nazir. We are up to Perek Bet, Mishnah Chet. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilun Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana Alayev, Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Chana bad Miriam, and Sason ben Raya, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. And Navdir ben Chaim lechaim, with the refuah shelemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betor Shah Chole Israel. When a person says, I will be a Nazir when I have a child, he means a child that is able to live. The Mishnah now discusses what happens if he made this declaration and a child was born that died shortly afterward. He pila ishto, if his wife lost the child, meaning it died shortly after birth, and we do not know if it was born being able to live or not. Now, the fact that a child died shortly after being born does not prove that it was born unable to live. It might have died from something that happened to it after it was born, for example, an infection. In general, the rule is that if the child was carried a full 9 months before being born, we assume that it had fully developed and was born fit to live. This birth would then fulfill the condition of when I have a child. On the other hand, if the child was not full term, we would assume it died because it was not fully developed. It would then not fulfill the condition of having a child. Now, the Mishnah speaks of a case where we do not know if it was carried a full 9 months. Therefore, we do not know whether its birth fulfilled the condition of the father's vow. And no Nazir, the Mishnah says he is not a Nazir at all, even out of doubt. According to the Tana Kama, a person never wants to be a Nazir out of doubt. Instead, he intends that if his vow results in a doubtful Nazirut, his declaration should be disregarded. Therefore, in this case, he is certainly not a Nazir. Rabbi Shimon says he is a Nazir out of doubt. Now, Rabbi Shimon rules that when a person makes a vow of Nazirut, he does not mean to exclude cases of doubt. Therefore, this person must observe Nazirut out of doubt. However, since only a definite Nazir may perform the concluding rituals, he must make himself into a definite Nazir to be able to conclude his Nazirut. Now, there are two concluding rituals that are forbidden to a non-Nazir: head shaving and offering a chatat. Head shaving is forbidden to a non-Nazir since it violates the Torah's prohibition against shaving the corners of the head, as it says in Vayikra chapter 19 verse 27. An exception is made in the case of a Nazir. Now, a chatat is a type of offering that may not be brought unless it is required. Since a Nazir out of doubt might in fact not be a Nazir, he is forbidden to perform either of these concluding rituals. Yet, if he is truly a Nazir, he cannot conclude his Nazirut until he performs them. Rabbi Shimon therefore teaches how to get out of this problem. To do so, Yomari should say, Imaya ben Kayama, if the child was able to live, Areyani Nazir Chova, then I am already a Nazir because of my previous obligation. V'im lav, and if it was not able to live, so that I am not yet a Nazir, Areyani Nazir Nedava, I am hereby a Nazir voluntarily. In short, the person now makes a new vow of Nazirut on the condition that he is not already Nazir due to the birth of this child. Therefore, if the dead child was able to live at the time it was born, his new vow does not take effect since he is already a Nazir because of the child's birth. However, if the child was not able to live, then he now undertakes a voluntary vow of Nazirut. In this way, the person is now a definite Nazir, and at the end of his term, he can perform the concluding rituals. Now, the doubt resulting from the birth of the child that died carries over to the next birth as well. Chazravi al-Daif, she gave birth again, this time to a child that lives. Harez a Nazir, he is a Nazir, since this child fulfills the condition he made in his vow. According to the Tana Kama, the dead child did not render him a Nazir because of the doubt in its status. Therefore, the original Nazirut vow still stands, and it takes effect with the birth of this child. Rabbi Shimon says he is again a Nazir out of doubt, since we are unsure whether the first child fulfilled his original condition. Although the person observed Nazirut after the first child was born, according to Rabbi Shimon, and he even made it into a definite Nazirut by means of a second conditional vow, that term of Nazirut did not necessarily fulfill his original vow, because that term might have been in fulfillment of his second vow of if the child was not able to live. Therefore, when his wife gives birth to a second child, it is possible that his original vow is now activated and he must again become a Nazir. However, it is also possible that his previous Nazirut did fulfill his original vow in the case the first child was able to live. So if so, he has no further obligation to become a Nazir. Therefore, he is again in doubt as to whether he must be a Nazir. However, since only a definite Nazir may perform the concluding rituals, Yomari should say, Im Rishon ben Kayama, if the first child was able to live, Harishon Chovav V'zu Nedava, then the first Nazirut was obligatory, meaning the Nazirut I already observed fulfilled my original obligation, and this new Nazirut that I now accept is voluntary. V'im Lav, but if the first child was not able to live, Harishon Nedava V'zu Chovav, then the first Nazirut was voluntary, and this one is obligatory. If the first child was not able to live, then the original Nazirut obligation never took effect and was never fulfilled. The Nazirut observed at that time was only fulfillment of the second conditional vow. Therefore, the Nazirut he observes now after the birth of the second child fulfills his original obligatory vow. Once again, his declaration ensures that no matter what happened, he is now a definite Nazir, and at the end of his term he can conclude with the necessary rituals. And the Rav does tell us, Rabbi Shimon, the Halakha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. That is the end of Mishnah Chet. Mishnah Tet teaches the law regarding Nazirut terms that overlap one another. Hareni Nazir, if someone says, I am hereby a Nazir, V'nazir k'shiyeli ben, and I will again be a Nazir when I have a son, meaning he accepts upon himself a standard term of Nazirut, 30 days, plus a second term of Nazirut to begin when he has a son. The first term begins immediately, and the second term upon the birth of a son. He expects to be able to complete the first term before the baby is born. Hitchil moned shelo, and he began counting his own term. Throughout this Mishnah and the next, the regular term of Nazirut is referred to as shelo, his own, and the term accepted on condition of his son's birth is called his son's Nazirut. And a son was then born to him before the end of his term. Mashlimet shelo, he continues his Nazirut until he completes his own term and performs the concluding rituals. And then he counts the Nazirut of his son and again performs the concluding rituals. Since he cannot observe both terms of Nazirut at once, he completes his own term first and then observes his son's Nazirut. Now he completes his own first since he declared his term first. Now in the next case, the declarations are in the reverse order. Hareni Nazir k'shiyeli ben, if he says, I am hereby a Nazir when I have a son, V'nazir, and I am also hereby a Nazir, meaning he first declares his son's Nazirut, and then a regular term of Nazirut. Hitchil moned shelo, if he began counting his own term since his son was not yet born, he can begin observing his term of Nazirut immediately. If he completes it before his son is born, there's no problem of overlapping Nazirut terms. However, in the Mishnah's case, the son is born before he finishes his term. V'akach nolad lo ben, and a son was then born to him before he finished his term. Maniach et shelo, he sets aside the count of his own term without performing the concluding rituals. Umoned shel beno, and counts his son's term since he accepted his son's Nazirut first. Since the first Nazirut he accepted on himself was for his son, it takes effect as soon as his time arrives, even though he is in the middle of observing the other Nazirut he accepted. And after he completes his son's Nazirut, he completes the rest of his own term. At the end of his son's term, he performs the concluding rituals. He then goes back to his own term and finishes observing the days of that term that he did not yet observe. He then performs the concluding rituals again. Now, the Mishnah's ruling that he resumes his own term of Nazirut depends on how many days of his term are left. If 30 days or more are left, he observes these days and performs the concluding rituals. However, if fewer than 30 days are left, for example, his original term, personal term was 30 days and the son was born after a few days, he cannot simply observe the remaining days and perform the concluding rituals again. As we will learn in the next Mishnah, B'ezrat Hashem b'li neder, a Nazir cannot shave his hair for the concluding ritual with less than a 30-day growth of hair. Since he shaved at the end of his son's term, he must remain a Nazir for a full 30 days after concluding his son's term, and then he performs the rituals again, as the Rambam writes in Hilchot Nazirut, chapter 4, Halakha 3. And that is an Abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.